Hello, welcome to the next revlog. It's the yearly theme revlog, woo! So, I can't remember if I've done like a closing thoughts on the 2025 theme vlog or not, and if I haven't, whoops, because this is the 2026 theme vlog. I'm not going to do a picture of the board because it's not done yet. It's still a little messy and needs some sort of rejigging, but I don't know when I'm going to have time to do it. And I wanted to do this, so I'm doing this. It's devotion is the theme for 2026. Don't think there's a subheading officially, but I do have 4 subheadings for it, which this is the most. I'm gonna get this out there early. This is the most like hippie woo woo theme so far, which devotion probably gives away. The subheadings of astral, spiritual, magical, and divine probably don't help with that impression very much. And so, what do I mean by devotion? It is an awkward term in a sense, but largely it is the sense of like devotion in a religious sense, but rather than to an external entity or force, it is to myself. Oh no. By you, I mean my phone. Being held up by a precarious balance that doesn't seem to want to stick. But that's okay. We'll figure it out. Ew. If I do that, no, that's worse. Anyway, whilst I'm figuring this out, there's a lot to the theme overall, and part of it is the... God, it's hard to think and do this at the same time. Hey, I think that worked. Hopefully. Okay. So, yeah. The whole body as a temple thing is definitely part of this year's theme. My body, my temple, worship to me. And so I need to maintain it, etc. But then, in the same sense, the training I do is sort of like also an act of worship, like going to church on a Sunday, so to speak. That's training for me. Taking further, we have like nutrition. That is very important and part of it. Rest is one of the rituals, etc. Gone through parts of this before, and I did write some notes where I'm sure I've phrased it much better, but I can't read and make sure that my phone isn't going to fall at the same time because it does look like it's slowly moving, so I need to keep an eye on it. So yeah, devotion is very much loyalty to myself, and is set not quite in opposition, but partially in opposition to the idea of discipline. Discipline, good, has its place, etc. But the theme is the guiding light, and my guiding principle when it comes to doing all of this stuff to self-improve and heal and recover and whatnot. The guiding principle for me is to ensure that I do it. And now you can do that through discipline. I'm hoping that this theme will enable me to do it in a less brutal way, I suppose. So, discipline very much to me is on X day you do Y exercise or read Z book, etc. You do the research, you do the thing, you schedule it out, and you just do it. Whereas I'm trying to be a bit more intuitive, which I think would very much help in terms of the coming to a place of recovery, which is sort of the goal. One of the goals. I have several goals, like I do every year. They're not sort of part of the theme, but they fall within the theme. So recovery is like goal 1, obviously. In fact, the first or 2 of the 3 goals that I have could just be called recovery. But the fact that I'm currently someone who has several old injuries or whatever, and that chronic fatigue condition that are holding me back, so to speak, approaching it from a intuitive position or whatever perspective is probably going to be more helpful than one of discipline, because one of discipline you then have to set structured rules of, okay, if you feel like this, do that. If you feel like this, do that. If you feel like this, do this. And then it's like, okay, well, how do I feel? And then by the time you get through it, that's just another layer. That's another thing you have to do. Then you're like, okay, well, I feel like this. Let's go to that thing and do that thing, rather than what I would prefer. What works better for me in discipline is do this. No matter how you feel, do this. But I'm not going to make much progress with that, because if it's a no matter how you feel, I need to make it something that I can do on my bad fatigue days. Not the incredibly bad fatigue days, because I can't do anything on those, but they are super rare, and hopefully rarer and rarer as time goes on. But with that, it's not something viable for me. So my preferred method of being disciplined ain't gonna work for continued improvement. It's got me to where I am, but moving forward, I think that the acts of devotion, acts of service towards myself, is going to be a better perspective to take, following that path of intuition. And then there is more to it than that as well. So it is sort of the most abstract, I guess, of the themes that I've got so far. And it involves abstract concepts and stuff. So I plan on doing a lot of looking inward, so to speak, dealing with repressed memories and trauma and all that jazz. Again, as part of devotion. And there's part that I'm going to get to about divine grace and suffering, and the fact that I think that I'm now at a point of my life where I need to be dealing with problems as and when they come up, rather than repressing them. And the first step to that, I feel, is getting a handle on all the ones that might be repressed, which is a long job, long-term goal thing. I guess that is a goal, I suppose. And I've started doing that a bit this year, 2025. But my washing should be done soon. But 2026, that's going to be a large part of what I'm going to be trying to do as well, and get more in touch with my emotions. And I've been doing very brief bits of dipping into traditional Chinese medicine. There's a Indian equivalent that I recently discovered is a thing that I didn't know about, and sound healing, etc. Those sorts of things I want to dip into more. And I know that in various things, balance has often been a medicinal trait. There's the whole four humours thing. I recently got a cold and was well, let me test some traditional Chinese medicine stuff, right? So I looked at my symptoms, compared it to TCM stuff, and it was okay, wind, cold. So cool, so I need to stay warm, have hot stuff. Looked it up, and they were cool, green tea, garlic, and ginger are all good for this and stay warm. So I stayed super warm, constantly updating hot water bottles, heating on in the car when I was in the car at work. When I was here, I was okay, PJs on, big duvet, blankets, etc. Hot water bottle again, all that sort of stuff. And I started to feel a bit ill on the Wednesday last week, and was almost fine by Sunday. So it got worse on the Thursday, Friday, and then a bit better on the Saturday, mostly okay on the Sunday. Yesterday, because I think today's Tuesday, yesterday was mostly fine again. I'm a bit more sniffly again today, but I haven't been doing that same level of stuff, because I've just been running around like a madman trying to get stuff done before I'm back at work again. And some of it's worked, some of it hasn't. That's just how it goes sometimes. This should be hung up from my previous batch of washing. I missed. Great. I have to pick that up in a minute. Hopefully I'll remember. Yes. So, I guess I'll talk about that Divine Grace thing that I mentioned now before I forget, because I've forgotten where I was coming from. I might as well go to one of the things I need to go to. So, Divine Grace has a lot of different interpretations, like Aquinas and St. Augustine, for example, each have their own, like, slightly different bits and bobs, if I remember correctly. For me, as an agnostic, primarily, I'm viewing it as just aspects of self that align with principles I think would be good for divine entities to have, as well as anything like mystical, spiritual, energy-wise, that may or may not exist. One of those things I'm going to research, because I'd rather research it and find nothing useful than not research it and miss something useful. And so that's part of the theme. But on top of divine grace, there's then like physical grace, which is something I've always lagged. I'm very much a brain first person, even though a lot of how I process is a physical process. I've always sort of been in my head a lot. There's been a lot of reading I've done, like daydreaming. There's a reason that I'm writing a book, you know? That should actually go on one of my list of goals for next year, 2026, is I want to have fully finished first draft of book, and then from there I will go through and do my own first, like, edit sweep, which would be a very quick thing of just, are there any areas that I've left a write this later to write? There's one chapter that I'm going to rewrite. There's a few people whose like names I need to fill in, where it's like I've given them a title, like a working title, and then I might come up with a name later and I need to fill those in. Gonna do those, run a spell checker, and then save that as draft 1. Well, draft 1.1, which is the one that I'm going to give to people to proofread, like my mother, and probably a copy to my friend who is also writing a book, but I fully expect both of them to read it relatively slowly, and I'll ask a few other friends and stuff as well to do their proofreads whilst I then move on to a different project. But yeah, so I'm aiming to become more physically graceful. There are certain things that I can do that do look pretty nice, I would say. Mostly are just kung fu things, but my general movements I want to increase, like efficiency, and in doing so they will probably look nicer and be better for me overall. And an element of that is going to be trying to blend like my brain body connection stuff, more nervous system work effectively, but I want to improve my proprioception and sense of touch as well. So yeah, they're like sort of things that this theme is going to guide me in doing when I'm thinking, oh, do I do this stretch or that stretch for this thing? I can think to myself, well, which one's going to be better? And by stretch, I mean mobility work. Just plain stretching isn't something I intend to do a lot of. It's all going to be sort of active mobility work, unless it is part of a cooldown, where it's like, okay, I've used this muscle a lot, let me just stretch it out now and I'll do mobility stuff on it later, or something along those lines. Like running, I'll stretch my calves at the end, probably, that sort of thing. Yeah, so that's a large chunk, I guess, of theme for next year. I'm pretty hopeful for it, as that's why I've got it. It's going to be a tough year, I think, in terms of living in society, but in terms of being myself, I think that I'm gonna do a good job there, so long as the living in society doesn't crush me too much, you know? We'll find out. And then goals, because as I said, most years I do have goals. They're not part of the theme per se, but they're worth putting in this theme video, I would say. So, 1, have this one every year pretty much. Next belt for Kung Fu. Currently, the goal is May or before. My instructor said May, June time, so I'm thinking I've got to do some pushing there, but I'm pretty confident with a large degree of what we've got. I just need to go through some other stuff with him and like some other members of the class, so I need to push for that when I am at class, and then fingers crossed that'll go well. And if not, then I guess it'll be a bit later in the year, but it's definitely a this year job, right? Because these goals, there's two types. One is I can almost definitely do this, so this is just on here as a focal point, something to remember. And then the other one is if all goes well, you might manage that this year, at which point, celebrations, and if not, fair enough, you didn't get everything go in your favour towards this, you know? So, yeah. And then the second one is closer to a if all goes well, but also something I'm relatively confident, which is to get to a 95% recovered on an average day from the chronic fatigue. That doesn't mean actually recovered, because recovered would mean getting rid of the chronic fatigue. I think even if I get to like 100% back to normal with the chronic fatigue, that doesn't necessarily mean recovered, because then I can still have bad fatigue days and I can cause flare-ups and stuff like that. I want to eventually get to a point where that's not a thing, where I could push myself 100% one day and not pay for it the next day any more than anyone else would. You know, if it's like, if we say it was working out, you know, I'll still get DOMs and whatnot, and I'll still be more tired the next day, but I won't be like, I can't physically move just from a pretty intense workout. It's like, movement is pain. Yes, maybe moving the muscles that I worked that day is pain, but movement in general is not. So yeah, eventually I want to uncook my body, effectively, but for now, getting to a point where on the average day I am nearly as energetic as I was beforehand, and then I just need to treat the actions I take with the fatigue in mind. That's a point I want to reach in 2026, and I'm relatively confident I can. I made a lot of progress in 2025. In fact, I'd say the vast majority of progress since I got the fatigue has been made in 2025. And so I know some things that have been working, some things that I will then continue to build on, and so on and so forth. And yes, I started to backslide a little bit a few months ago when work changed, because stress is a huge flare-up device. But I'm adapting, and I'm clawing back to where I was before that backslide occurred. And so once I've done that, it's then not going to be too bad, I don't think, to just make it that little bit further to get to that like 90-95% mark. And when I get there, then I think I'll be able to really like do stuff more than I am now, which means more research, more experimenting, more results, closer I get to actually fixing the problem. And then the last one is full rehab of the body, got my various injuries, etc. that I'm trying to get rid of, need to get that done. And again, I've made a lot of progress this year, and so I just want to get to a point where I've got like a basic functional body, which means any training I do on top of it isn't gonna be compounding a negative trait that I might have had for a while. It's gonna be just increasing towards directions that I want to, without then having to make more rehab work down the line. And then, as I said, the fourth one that I didn't write down would be get that book, Draft 1, done. And I'm confident on that one, because I'm almost there. Draft 1.0, or maybe I'll call it 0.5, which would be still need to go through and add those names and rewrite that chapter and whatnot. If I did like 1,000 words a day, I could probably have done in a month or two. And admittedly, haven't done any today, didn't do any yesterday or the day before, but I'm having issues with my laptop, which is my best writing device. But I'm going to hopefully do a little bit after a call regarding it with my friend who's also writing a book this evening, before then doing some training. And by a little bit, I mean a few hundred words minimum, hopefully more, but writing at my computer isn't great. Standing desk, awkward heights and stuff like that. But I'm going to see what I can do. I'm sure I've got a workaround that I could probably pull off, maybe, but we'll figure it out. And then, yeah, that's pretty much the plan. Do some writing every day, get back to it, especially when my laptop has been sent away, hopefully repaired under warranty and returned to me. I can then get back to doing it better, more. And with work being an absolute pain in the butt, writing a reasonable amount whilst I'm at work, very hard. So my plan's going to be, like, do a tiny bit each day that I'm at work, if, like, a sentence, if I'm working that day, and then from there, on the days I'm not working, is when I have to, like, make up for it, and be like, okay, I'm going to set aside an hour, 2 hours this day, and writing's what I'm going to do. During that time, it's going to be a lot of getting up, making cups of tea, and going to the loo, because I like to have my tea whilst I'm writing. But yeah. So that's the 2026 theme, devotion. Very hippie woo-woo. And I'm not going to hide that, really. I don't think it's a bad thing. It is. I don't know if any of you will be doing yearly themes. I always recommend them. But hey, whatever. I'm going to go, because the washing baskets that I'm using, I've been holding from falling for a while, but they're going. So I'll catch you cats on the flip-flop, and goodbye.